What is a point guard in the NBA? And is the Utah Jazz point guard Jordan Clarkson? That's next on today's edition of Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Today's show, the 6'1" point guard fading, teams going without a true point guard increasing. Why? What does it mean for the Jazz? And is Jordan Clarkson the answer? We'll dig into numbers. We'll look at some pick and roll numbers. We'll find a bunch of things to try to understand whether or not this is the answer for the Jazz in this upcoming season. On whether that Jordan Clarkson is your point guard. We'll also look at where the Jazz ranked in some of the power rankings of the NBA and touch on James Harden if time permits. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. Thank you to the everydayers who stop by and join us, and thank you for making Locked on Jazz your first listen today. Make it a first listen each and every day. Thank you very much to everybody involved. All right, let's, by the way, I tweeted out work anniversary stuff, got a bunch of great responses, and just want to say thank you to everybody on that when I was out. All right, so 33% of NBA teams, in my mind, will be without a traditional point guard next year. So it's not just the Jazz that are suddenly deciding, we don't really need a point guard. Now, that also means 20 teams. I mean, there's plenty of great ones, right? Drew Holiday, Giannis in Milwaukee. Donovan and Garland in Cleveland. Brunson, Trae Young, LaMelo Ball, Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, John Morant, Jamal Murray, De'Aaron Fox, Steph Curry, Mike Conley still in there at 6'1" somehow. Shea and Josh Giddey, Luka, CJ McCollum, and Fred VanVleet. I mean, the first thing that jumps out from that is something that we've been talking about for a long time. If you're an everydayer, you've heard this. I've said this for a while. If you're not 6'4", it's almost impossible to play in the league now. And it's what's nice about Keontae George is he's got the size. But if you're not 6'4", it's getting super hard to play in this league. You look at those, Donovan and Garland are unique. Brunson's unique. Trae Young's unique. CJ McCollum, Mike Conley. You better be, and I think Mike Conley's minutes are going to go way down this year. I think Minnesota's going to get close to this group of probably being the 10th team that plays without a point guard. Anthony Edwards will be their guy. If everyone's switching defensively, over half of the NBA teams' primary or secondary ball handler is now 6'7" or taller, maybe even 6'9" or taller. Right? Like you have Drew Holiday, but you got Giannis really handling, right? The Celtics, it's Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. The Raptors, Scotty Barnes is going to be their point guard. I don't know who the Bulls ball handler is with Lonzo being out. I'm not sure what the Nets are entirely doing with their point guard situation. Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, both at 6'5", are the Suns' point guards. Clippers, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. Lakers, Austin Reeves, LeBron James. Spurs, Victor Wembanyama, and who? And so when you start running down the list, even like what we're calling point guards, Shea and Josh Giddey are both huge. Luke is huge. And then you get the team's secondary ball handler, they're all big. And so in a league where everyone's switching all the time, unless you are super special, Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland, super special, and you're 6'1" and you're getting switched onto a big, it's a tough task. You're in a little bit of trouble. And so I think from a defensive standpoint, it's the first reason why why half the teams or a third of the teams in the league are now going to be without what I would call a traditional point guard. And it's because of that size that has the hand the ball, and that people are just running guard-to-guard switches and getting you stuck. Like Draymond's a secondary ball handler. He can't take advantage of the switch the same way, but he's still 6'9", he's your secondary ball handler, if not primary ball handler in Golden State. Jokic is your number one primary ball handler in Denver. Really, it's 7'1". You don't want a 6'1" guard stuck on him. And so you're getting teams going away. So from the Jazz standpoint, they still have Colin Sexton. They still have Taylor Horton-Tucker. They still have Jordan Clarkson. Ochai Abaji's not in, and they have Chris Dunn. And they have Keontae George. So I started to look at this roster, and I have to ask, is Jordan Clarkson the point guard? Like, to me, it begins to feel like Jordan Clarkson is the point guard for a few reasons. One is that Jordan's a much more versatile player than I think people give him credit for. You know, he came into the league very similar to Keontae George. He was a lower draft pick. But if you go kind of look at the player he was when he came out of at 6'4" and 194 pounds out of Missouri, he was older. He was 22, but he came in as kind of a combo guard, 4 assists, I think his rookie year, 3.5, 4 assists his rookie year for the Lakers on a terrible team. And then as time goes on, he ends up becoming just kind of this electric off the bench scorer. And then last year, he ups his assists back up to 4. I'm not sure I think assists is actually the answer here, but can you facilitate? Are you mature enough? Do you understand how to run the team? Can you get the team started? I think he can do all those things. It's interesting to look at Jazz lineup data last year to try to figure it out. So if you go decide, okay, we're going to put Walker, Kessler, and Lowry Markkanen on the floor because those are our 2 primary guys, and we're going to take Mike Conley off, and we take Chris Dunn off, you still have the Jazz at a plus 6.2. You still have the offenses being good, largely because of a pretty high offensive rebound rate that might be hard to, like, that's a little, there's 2 numbers in here that jump out. One is teams missed an unusual amount of shots, maybe because Lowry and Walker are so big, but teams' effective field goal percentage was at 50%. And secondarily was that and it was largely at the rim, right? Teams shot 58% at the rim with those guys on the floor together last year. Those rim numbers are incredible. When Walker, Kessler, and Lowry Markkanen on the floor together, teams shot 58% at the rim against the Jazz last year. It's the best in the league. The Jazz effective field goal percentage with Walker and Lowry on the floor was 50.2%. It's one of the best lineups in all of the NBA. So the Jazz lineup with Walker and Lowry is successful because of this kind of incredible defensive effective field goal percentage number, which time will tell, and then this incredible offensive rebounding rate. In fact, when Taylor Horton-Tucker, Ochai Abaji are on the floor with Kelly, Lowry, and Walker, the offensive rebounding rate was 44%. It's pretty hard to replicate. But it's interesting. If we just look at Jordan. So Jordan's on the floor with Walker, Lowry, and I think you've got to put your 3 best players on the floor. And then if you're going to start Jordan and you want to start Ochai, then that's your lineup. I mean, I think this is a little bit out of necessity. And I do kind of like the idea of spreading the floor 5 out with your second lineup. I always talk about Lowry playing center and having Keontae and Colin Sexton having driving lanes. So you put Jordan on the floor with Lowry and Walker, your numbers go down to plus 2.7. Here's what's interesting. Here are the guards that they played with in the results. With Sexton, they're minus 1.6. Defense was horrendous with Clarkson and Sexton, with Lowry and Walker. With Taylor Horton-Tucker, they were plus an 18.6. Now our sample size is about to get small. So they were plus 18.6. Defense was actually pretty good. We go back to Sexton, but we now have Beasley on the floor, and we're doing 53 possessions. We're minus 21. Keep Beasley on the floor. You have Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Again, guys that aren't with us anymore. You're minus 22. Jordan with Lowry and Walker as the 4 and the 5 now. It's kind of a little bit of what they did here. Small sample size. Beasley with just Clarkson. So this is Clarkson and Taylor Horton-Tucker. This is probably as close to Clarkson as a point guard you get, plus 39. And then Clarkson, Abaji, Horton-Tucker, Markkanen, Kessler, 28 possessions, plus 22. Limited sample size. Really limited sample size. And if you start to, get rid of guys that aren't going to be on the team, and so you're only looking at that data, it goes away. I mean, that's why, hey, it seems weird to have Malik Beasley and N'Keal Alexander-Walker into conversations right now when they're not there, but you only have 336 possessions all year in which Markkanen, Kessler, and Jordan Clarkson played with guys that are on the team, that is on the roster. And you only have 4 lineup combinations that play at least 20 possessions together. Sexton, Clarkson, Markkanen, Olynyk, and Kessler, which I think could be some people's starting lineup this year, minus 1.6 with a horrendous defense. 154 possessions, half of those possessions. 86 possessions for Clarkson, Talen Horton-Tucker, Markkanen, Olynyk, Kessler. John Collins would probably be starting. Plus 19. Jordan Clarkson, Ochai Agbaji, Talen Horton-Tucker, Lowry, Markkanen, Walker Kessler. Plus 22. 28 possessions. So the next question is, okay, if you go without a point guard, do you still have a pick and roll game? Now, the Jazz pick and roll was a little less than some other teams last year, with a lot of our off-ball movement, our off-ball screens were much more prevalent than some of the other stuff we did, than other teams did. But what's our pick and roll game next year? If without Mike Conley, if Jordan Clarkson's our point guard, we've got to use Walker Kessler as a rolling big in offense in some capacity. So we'll take a look at the Jazz pick and roll numbers from last year next and see if we reveal anything about who can play point guard. That's coming up as we continue on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's the official sportsbook of Locked On, and a great opportunity for you to get involved in the game and have some fun. It's FanDuel's got some great promotions for you right now. If you've not ever gotten into MLB, here's your chance to take a full first swing at betting MLB, as FanDuel gives you 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from money line to over under to what you think is going to be the first home, who's going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Today's show is also brought to you by my friends over at Intercap Lending. That's Steve Carter, the great, great Steve Carter. If you're looking to do a loan, you might want to do it. Feds sound like they might up it again. We'll see. Steve can help you out. He helped me out just recently. He's done 2 mortgages for me. He's done 1 for our COO. Probably going to do another one for him at some point here. It's like the best, truly the best customer service that I can tell you that you're going to get is from Steve Carter. The guy's just a master. It's why Intercap has grown so fast. As of like every year, they're just doubling up, moving. They've been with us since 2018 advertising. For 5 years, we've been telling people to go to Steve Carter. And it's just, frankly, for me, it's just a great honor to do so because Steve is just the best and so responsive and on top of things for you. You can call Steve directly, 385-800-8528, or you can have me set you up. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com, and I'll get you the setup with Steve. If you go by your own, make sure you do mention Locked On Jazz. You get the corporate discount with Intercap through Locked On Jazz. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. If you're looking for a mortgage or a loan right now, please let us help you out with the greatness of Steve Carter and Intercap Lending. Hyper responsive, adapting to change, and there to get you the best deal you possibly can. It's all over at Intercap Lending. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We'll continue as the week goes on. Tomorrow, I really want to dig into Talen Horton-Tucker. I feel like there's some interesting, I feel like he's the forgotten man. And a little bit of my thought on Talen Horton-Tucker is he's younger than Ochai Agbaji. We're all in love with Ochai Agbaji, rightfully so. He's just the best, and he's such a great guy. And at the same time, I do wonder, like, if we go look at the last 20 games, and I haven't done it, I'll do the research tonight, of Ochai Agbaji and Talen Horton-Tucker, why is Talen Horton-Tucker the forgotten guy and Ochai Agbaji is the loved one? It's worth conversation. And they don't have to be pitted against each other, actually. All right, let's take a look at the pick and roll numbers from last year. So the number one pick and roll of returning players for the Jazz last year was Taylor Horton-Tucker and Walker Kessler. They ran 250 pick and rolls, and they were not particularly good. They were 0.95 points per pick and roll. You want to be over 1. Jordan Clarkson and Walker Kessler ran 240 pick and rolls, so within 10, for a 1.038. That's pretty good. In fact, Mike Conley, Lauri Markkanen was better. Interestingly, Jordan Clarkson, Kelly Olynyk was better and was our best of anyone out there that's still returning. So that's a pop big, Jordan driving. Jordan Clarkson, Kelly Olynyk is our third most returning point guard matchup. So now it's interesting because Kelly's probably coming off the bench if John Collins starts. At 1.156 in 202 pick and rolls. This is not a lot of pick and rolls. Like, you start looking around the league, guys run, like, I'll pull it for you. The top guys, like, this is not very many pick and rolls, right? Per 100 possessions, they're on the floor together. Clarkson and Kessler are running like 13 pick and rolls. It's not very many. Like, it's interesting of whether or not the Jazz are abandoning the pick and roll game a little bit. Are we really becoming predominantly, if you think about our flow of our game, everyone's bringing it up. We're getting actions, are coming off ball pin downs, which we ran a ton of last year, playing the game in that way, letting an open side floor where Lauri can come off a pin down and then play an open side or play almost a pick and roll on that side. Just kind of, basically the guy who's picking for him without the ball is basically running a pick and roll, right? If Lauri comes off the pin down, catches, and that guy's John Collins rolling the baseline and they've switched it and Lauri can catch, you might have a little game going on there. Or if that's John Collins curling in the lane, John's such a great athlete, you might want to use him that way. And you have Walker playing on the weak side in the dunker spot. You got to figure out where you're moving people. Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen ran about 198 pick and rolls, were not particularly good. 0.90. Now that's probably a 3 on it, switches on to Jordan. Jordan doesn't have a big advantage there. Jordan's going one-on-one. It's not a great advantage. Taylor Horton-Tucker, Lauri Markkanen ran 193 pick and rolls, 0.93. Again, not great. Taylor Horton-Tucker, Kelly Olynyk ran 147 pick and rolls, 0.97. Now, here's an interesting one. Again, limited number, 126 pick and rolls. Colin Sexton, Walker Kessler, 1.09. Pretty good. Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, 0.9. Not as good. You're better off bringing Lauri, if he's playing the 3, off-ball screens on the pin down, particularly however you want to do it. Bring a small down there, bring a big down there, let Lauri have the advantage off the ball if they try to switch it, or get them confused of whether they're switching or not. They're necessarily maybe playing up at the top with a pick and roll, and then they just switch off Lauri. By the way, our best pick and roll last year, just if you're interested, other than Jordan and Kelly, I think Jordan and Kelly was like right there with our number one. Chris Dunn, Damian Jones in limited sample size, I think was right there. The other one super interesting is Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, just running that switch up top, kind of interchanging those two. Worked fairly well. So those are our primary. Colin Sexton, Kelly Olynyk, not as successful. So you kind of have those combinations. Taylor Horton-Tucker, Walker Kessler, 0.95. Jordan Clarkson, Walker Kessler, 1.03. Colin Sexton, Walker Kessler, 1.09. Pretty good. So Colin and Walker in limited sample size, 126 picks, but these are all limited. Was the best at 1.09. Jordan and Walker at 1.03. Taylor and Walker at 0.95. If Kelly's playing some backup 5, then Jordan and Kelly were the best at 1.16. Taylor and Kelly were at 0.97. Colin and Kelly were down to 0.91. And then Lauri, who again I talked about, Mike and Lauri kind of figured it out. Jordan and Lauri were 0.90. Taylor and Lauri 0.93. Colin and Lauri were 0.90. So they'll have to figure that out. Those are the 3 primary. Chris Dunn and Lauri ran 57 pick and rolls late in the year. They were actually pretty good together, 1.04, but very limited. Chris Dunn actually ran as many pick and rolls with Damian Jones and Udoka Azubuike next to remind you of like what the end of the season looked like last year. So super interesting to look at. And then I just think the answer, like, what did all that tell us? It tells us we have a limited pick and roll exposure and time on the floor for those guys. And it's an interesting question of if we do kind of go with this, we don't have a natural pick and roll guard. And we have a big pick and roll rolling big in Walker Kessler. And, by the way, just to give you kind of contextually, I think what we're saying with 200 some odd pick and rolls were kind of the highest number we had of anybody in there. And I said, like, we're just talking incredibly small numbers. So Talen Horton-Tucker and Walker Kessler ran 250 pick and rolls together last year. That's 140th of any combination in the league. There were 140 combinations of players that ran more pick and rolls than that combination. That's to tell you like how small our sample size is of like pick and rolls and how many other players are out there. Mike Conley and Lowry ran our most, but of our returning guys, there's 140 pick and rolls. So 3 on every team that ran more often than what we ran, than what we're running with Jordan Walker. 240 is 151, right? So 3 on every roster. It's a lot. So we're really limited in pick and roll exposure and time. It doesn't mean JC can't play a point guard, but it means our offense may very, very well be an offense that is run without a pick and roll game and much more of this other stuff. And then the question is like, well, maybe anybody, I think Will really believes in anybody can just get us into the offense and go. So then the question is, when's a pick and roll needed? When's a point guard needed? And that gets into some late game questions to me. How can we be late game after Mike, when Mike got injured last year, some of our late game play got a little sketchy. Right. And to me, that's where I do think that organization, but Jordan's a pro and has been around a lot and probably has that exposure and that experience. You just need a lot of ball handling creators late in games. And that might be the bigger concern for us, is that if you're playing Jordan and you're playing Ochai and you're playing John Collins and you're playing Lowry and you're playing Walker, you got one ball creator on the floor. We were 12-14 by the end of the year when Mike Conley was on the floor in close games. So we weren't like, the memory a little bit, I think, is we were great. We were great to start the year. We won a ton of close games early. We were absolutely outstanding. And then we didn't when Mike came back. We struggled a little bit there. And we finished the year, if I remember correctly, at like 23-29. So I think we were 9-15 with Mike Conley not on the floor in clutch games. It's not great. I mean, obviously 12-14 is better, but not. That's so variable. It's 3 games, and that ball bounces can go either way. All right, where do the Jazz rank in power rankings? We'll touch on that as we continue here on Locked On Jazz. Thanks very much for making your first listen today on Locked On Jazz. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, we'll dig into Talen Horton-Tucker. Friday, we'll look at John Collins on the show. I might do an Ask LOJ, though, because I've been out, so I might push the John Collins show to next week. Interview series is coming. If you have anybody that you want to hear on the show, please let me know, and we can reach out to them. I want to have Big T on. Ron Boone's going to have a little knee replacement surgery. I want to have him on before he does that. Check in with my guy Bowler, who I try to talk to anyway. So we'll see how Holly is, all that fun stuff. All right. The Athletic has the Jazz 19th in their power ranking, and ESPN has the Jazz 20th in their power ranking. Surprisingly consistent. What's interesting to me about the power rankings, actually, just without the Jazz, just like looking at ESPN's power rank they just put out, Kings 12, Knicks 13, Dallas 14, Thunder 15. Like, Kings 12 seems super low to me. Knicks 13 seems pretty low to me after their playoffs last year. Dallas still has Luka and Kyrie, and I know they were messed up last year, but I do think people are sleeping on this one a little bit. They were unstoppable offensively when those two were on the floor last year. They were a disaster for all sorts of weird transition defense, weird stuff. Like, when you watch them, and it was OJ in the white Bronco. I have to watch, like, what disaster is about to happen. Oh dear, to watch them. But like, still, as much as everybody, I mean, I think it might have been a Luka issue as much as it was, I think it was probably more of like in some ways, but like it's just the narrative on those two right now is like it didn't work. Huh. Their offense was a 121.7 when those two were on the floor. They were +5 when they were on the floor. There's areas where they've got to get better, but I don't like. And their most common three guys they played with last year were Josh Green, Reggie Bullock, and Dwight Powell. They'll be better than that. Like they didn't play with a very good players last year. So I don't think Dallas is terrible. And the Thunder at 15, maybe I'm kind of buying the Thunder hype a little bit, but I feel like the Thunder are kind of on the verge of making a jump. And maybe that is 15th. Like that's how good this league is right now. Right? If the Kings have the year they just had, they didn't change anything. Like, okay, you can criticize them for not changing anything, but nobody made huge, massive, dramatic changes in the offseason last year. So I'm not sure why I think like the Lakers and the Warriors and everybody are suddenly vaulting way ahead of the Kings, who last year were 12th in the league, who were their second seed in the league. They were unbelievably healthy, but still the Kings like were pretty good. Here are the teams they have below the Jazz: Pacers, Bulls, Magic, Rockets, Raptors, Spurs, Hornets, Blazers, Wizards, Pistons. Boys, Detroit, golly. Detroit's been in this, feels like they've been in this rebuild forever. The problem for Detroit is they started this rebuild, unlike the Jazz and Oklahoma City and Houston. They did it without any picks. Like if you recall, they had Blake Griffin and they just kind of midway through a season where they were 41-41, they pivoted out of it. But they've gone, this is how hard a rebuild is. They've gone 20, 20, 23, and 17. So, and that first year, unfortunately, in their rebuild, that's kind of a rebuild that happens to them. They don't get a pick out. Then they've had great draft luck. They got Cade Cunningham. They've got Jaden Ivey. They missed on Killian Hayes. Like that's the reality, though. They hit on Jalen Duren. Like they haven't done this terribly, and they're still really bad. They're projected to be the worst team in the NBA. And if you kind of go through it, you know, their first year, they're not good. They end up with Cade Cunningham, and then they get like they're drafting, right? They missed on Killian Hayes. Okay. Like they're not been bad. They're projected to be the worst team in the league this year. So Pacers, who a lot of people really like, that's probably in some people's mind. The Jazz have, like, if you have the Jazz at 19, you probably have the Pacers below. If you have the Jazz at 20, you have the Pacers above. Bulls without Lonzo, they went all in and it kind of has fallen apart. Magic just don't seem to be quite ready yet. Rockets have made their moves, but with two incredibly inefficient offensive players in Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. Raptors, Sean Woodley did a really good Locked On Raptors episode yesterday. Just kind of plan 6-9 still on, and it's not sure why. And then Spurs, Hornets, Blazers, Wizards, Pistons. So that's where we're sitting. It's going to be an interesting year. Like the Jazz have kind of made it sound as though they would like to, if possible, finish in the play-in or in the playoffs to be able to get rid of this draft pick, unencumber their picks, allow Oklahoma City's going to be the big win out of this. They're going to get a top 15 pick out of Derek Favors for taking Derek Favors' contract. Wow, what a trade for Sam Presti. And look at that. I was going to talk about James Harden, but I'm going to call it. That was kind of our third segment's always kind of a league-wide look on things. It's just the league is doing this. Like, I think Dallas could be the fifth best team. Kings could be the fifth best team. Instead, they're 12th and 14th. All right, it's Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving insight, expertise, geeky numbers, hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan. Thanks so much for being a part of the show. I appreciate you. We will talk to you tomorrow, talking Talen Horton-Tucker and how does he fit in all this.